ILTV Plus, your news from Israel and more 24/7. Start your free trial today. Subscribe at ILTV.tv and watch from any device. Moving on, in looking forwards towards the creation of a greener future, thousands of Israelis have been jumping at the chance to order an electric vehicle for private use. But few likely predicted the massive costs that will soon follow. As of today, the average cost of gas in Israel is nearly $9 per gallon, nearly 62% of which is coming from added taxes. And this translates to some $6 billion in annual tax revenues for Israel. But taxes on electricity don't even exist yet. So as e-vehicles in Israel grow in popularity, the government looking for ways to recover the lost income. And here with the details is economic and consumer behavior expert, Assistant Professor Vili Abraham. Vili, it's great to have you back. Now, how much has Israel lost so far in these tax revenues, and how much does Israel predict it will lose in the coming years?
Well, if we look at the direct and indirect taxes from taxing fuel, cars, and car parts, and if you also include VAT, we're talking about $15 billion that goes into government coffers annually. So far, the government has lost 9% of income, and it's quite nervous about the fact that it's going to lose so much money coming into the government coffers because the budget is really based on, a large amount of the budget is based on taxes levied on cars.
So, I understand also that the subsidies on e-vehicles, for example, will end, and a luxury tax for any e-vehicle costing over $68,000 will likely be imposed. How else? What other expenses are we about to see tacked on to this new wave in the market?
Well, if you look at Victoria, Australia, what they do is they're the first country that levies taxes on traveling by electric vehicles. So for every kilometer, you pay 2.5 cents to the government. And this is a similar model that the government wants to adopt. And this will increase considerably, this will decrease considerably the savings that we were benefiting from because of electric vehicles. So it means that the only benefit is that the maintenance cost and the insurance will be a bit cheaper. And by the way, Norway and also England is losing a lot of money because there are more and more electric vehicles on roads. If you look at Norway, 77% of all new vehicles purchased were electric vehicles. That's
Wow.
a huge, huge number of vehicles.
So is Israel trying to tax electricity at refueling stations in a way that will balance out? Or is Israel looking to expand its profit margins? For example, this is all on top of the plan to tax drivers just for existing on central Israeli roads. And more importantly, how will this translate to prices at both the electric and the gas refueling stations?
All right, well, the government is trying to offset the loss in revenue because more and more Israelis are buying electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, which, by the way, the Israeli government has incentivized. So it encouraged us to buy more cars, but now it's losing revenue. So what it wants to do is to adopt a very similar model to the one that was adopted in Australia. Probably every year we'll have to report our mileage or the number of kilometers traveled, and they will charge us a tax based on our traveling. So the more you travel, the more you pay.
Interesting. All right. And between all the new taxes and the fines, it seems like those in a lower socioeconomic status are going to be the hardest hit. Is this true? Would you agree with that statement? And if so, how does the government plan to address this inequality?
Well, unfortunately, if you look at the taxes that are going to be levied on electric vehicles, there's really not going to be any differentiation. The logic, at least as the government sees it, you've paid for fuel. Now you don't pay for fuel, and you've paid whether you are poor, middle class, or rich, and you're going to pay now for traveling. And I think it's part of its plan to reduce travel. If you look at statistically and even officially, official reports show that there are more and more traffic jams in the country. And I think it's one way for the government to decrease traffic jams on roads.
Wow. All right. Well, it's a lot to think about. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, Vili.
It was a pleasure.